Hey, what's up, everybody? This is A.L. Johnson with Elevated Men, back for another very lively conversation. Thanks for joining us. It's going to be a good one. This is part 3 of our series on old school versus new school, the generational breakdown. This is actually a continuation from last week where we talked about religion and politics, how the two intersect, and how they really just kind of shape our belief systems. And so this is really going to be a good conversation. Got one of our brothers, Mike Patton. He hasn't been on in a while, so we're definitely looking forward to hearing what he has to say. We're going to get the show started right now. All right, let's get into it. We got a lot to discuss, so we're just going to jump straight into this thing. I'm going to go ahead and introduce the panel real quick. For those of you who aren't familiar, Elevating Men is the premier destination for men who want to improve their lives. We're all about building up men so that we can create stronger families and stronger communities. To my right, I've got Andrew Boykin. He's the founder of Dinner and Dialogue, as well as The Restoration. Next to him, we have a first-time guest, third time on the series, his first series with us, Josh. Below myself, got Pastor Mike Patton, also a bodybuilder and personal trainer. Next to him, Corey Gilmore. He's also a podcast host. Definitely want to check him out. And then in your bottom right, we've got Lojo Speaks, Vice President of Elevating Men. And so, fellas, we had a great conversation last week. We ended up going over our hour. And then we still have more to talk about. We had a post-show wrap-up that went for another 30 minutes. And here we are talking about the same thing again, religion and politics. It's extremely important because at the end of the day, both of them affect our lives. They affect our decision-making process and so much more. And so there was a question at the end that I want to make sure we flesh out a little bit. And so Josh, it actually came from him. It was about free will. And so when we talk about politics, a lot of times our religious beliefs determine who we vote for. At that point, we're subject to whatever laws they're looking to put in place. And so if we just go take two simple ones, marijuana laws and say abortion, those are things that affect our body and our free will. So he brought up a really excellent question, which is at what point do we stop religion and politics from trickling over into our free will? And so I kind of want to start there. Josh, what were your thoughts on there? Just kind of get the conversation started.
See, so my thing is, I feel like you go with free will until it affects somebody else. So when it's affecting only yourself, it's completely okay to kind of live by free will and use that as a parameter. But once it starts affecting somebody else, then you're dipping into somebody else's free will and somebody else's life. So I feel like that's when it should stop.
Good answer. Good answer. Mike, you haven't been on. I know you've been watching. Make sure that you unmute yourself so that we can hear you. But you've been watching. What are your thoughts on the conversation so far? And when it comes to free will versus our political and religious stances, how do those intersect? Okay, I think we may be having technical difficulties. If you're watching this, give us a like or a thumbs up just to let us know that you can hear everything okay, and everything is flowing. Mike, I do need you to unmute yourself before you speak, and so I'll come back to you. So I did, in our conversation or in our group chat, I went ahead and dropped a couple videos that kind of talked about the church. They talked about religion, politics, and all these things. One of the things that I thought was pretty interesting, last week's show, I said that the way that I grew up, I was taught that politics and religion shouldn't intersect. Preachers shouldn't run for political office. There was something that Al Sharpton said that I hadn't really thought about before. He said that God raised kings in the Bible. And so you had David, Solomon, Saul, all these different figures. And so if we come back to that question, what do you feel about that? If he was raising up kings in the Bible, does that change your stance or viewpoint on those two things intersecting? Andrew, I'll start with you.
You would start with me. I thought you were going to start with Corey. No. So those two things they are one thing, in my opinion. Meaning, I always go by priority, first cause, and first cause was the people and their need to be led, their need to be fed, their need to be saved, their need. And from that, someone rose and stood a little taller, stood a little bolder, and actually went out from the group and brought back some meat. And they were very happy with that person. And they looked to that person to continue to bring back meat. And they would always listen to that person and follow that person's lead. And that person actually set the stage for a leader and soon a king, because we had to give titles and names as we got more advanced with our following.
Interesting. So there was something else that came up, and it ties directly into that. And so when we talk about the power that the church has when it comes to politics, so we say that, maybe they should be separate church and politics. But then when you look at election time, we see the politicians going into the churches to start garnering votes. A lot of times the political issues that may be on the ballot don't necessarily line up with the church beliefs. And so I wanted to do a little research, kind of figure out how that relationship started. And in the Black community, it started during civil rights, because technically there was nowhere for Black people to meet and have, open and honest discourse about political and social issues. And so that was the only building that was available to them. Furthermore, there was something that said that the Black pastor was the most powerful person in the Black community because he was the only person not beholden to the power structure, meaning that his income and the way that he provides for his family came from the community of people that look like him and believe like him, versus the average person who says, hey, if I go and protest, now I'm in fear of losing my job and not being able to provide for my family. So now here we are in 2022. We have plenty of forums and ways that we can get together and speak. And so my question is, in 2022, should the church still hold the same place when it comes to helping us shape our political views? Lauren, what would you say to that?
Yeah, I don't think that it's a problem that the church is playing a role, because they essentially play the same role, which is a place for the community to come and to have conversations in one setting. So I think maybe where the breakdown has come in as the generations has progressed is the trust in the pastor and the trust in church and religion in general. And I want to point out something that's probably not really talked about as much, and that is the percentage of voters, right? We have these conversations wherever we have them, whether it's church, library, schools, whatever. But when you look at the percentage of people that actually go to the polls and cast a vote, it's less than 10%. So we're having all these conversations, but we're not necessarily empowering people in large numbers to actually go out and cast a vote based off the education that they've received in whatever setting they're getting the information from.
I like that. I like that. That's definitely a good response. LaRon Barnes, he just hopped on. Our brother LaRon, the motivator, man. How you doing?
Listen, I am wonderfully well, and it's good to see y'all faces. I promise it is, man. Y'all looking all handsome. Well, look at y'all. Y'all looking good.
Hey, man, we try. But listen, man, I know that he has something personal that he's celebrating today, man. What you got going on?
Well, listen, I just wanted to hop on here for a moment. First of all, I love you all, and I appreciate you all. I got my little ones here. Come on, little one. Come on, Destiny. It is their birthday today. This is their birthday today, and so I just wanted to bring them on. They were happy about it. They've been excited all day, and so you all want to say hi to everybody, the family? Come on, say hi to the family.
Tell us hi.
There you go.
I remember seeing her at the event. She was running around.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Born on the same day. You hear me?
There you go.
Happy birthday to you.
Man, if y'all watching this, man, y'all got to give some hearts for the babies. Happy birthday to the babies. You know what I'm saying? Definitely. Thanks for coming through, LaRon. Thanks for coming through, man. We're going to miss you tonight. But listen, this is what Elevating Men is all about. At the end of the day, it's a man taking care of his responsibility, taking care of his children. And what's most important today for him isn't this podcast, is being there for his children. And so we appreciate what you're doing, bro. We'll catch you next week. Go have some fun with those babies, man.
Sure will. I appreciate you. I love you all, family, and I'll see you soon. Say bye.
Yes, sir. Perfect. All right. So let's get back to this serious business. All right. That was really good, Lauren. That was a really good point. We've got a couple people here in the comments. I definitely don't want to look over what they've said. And so Robert Hawkins, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your continued support. He said, render unto Caesar what is Caesar's and render unto God what is God's. That's how you separate the two. We'll come back to that for sure. Keelan Powell, the environment has changed so much. The technology has played a great role as well. Now, for me, when we talk about technology and how it may affect or shape our views in religion and politics, is now the conversation that may have been among a few people at the barbershop is now millions of people online. And so, we're here in Kansas City. For those of you that are viewing from other places, we just made the Shade Room and the Breakfast Club Donkey of the Day. We had a pastor here, not going to name his name, but he went viral for talking to his congregation about, not getting this watch that he wanted, right? He called them broke, busted, disgusted. He called them his children, his broke little children, and all these different things. And so when you say that technology has played a role in some of the separation in religion and politics, I really believe that it comes from two things. One, the church has been put on blast a lot on social media, right? Like we see the prosperity pastors, we see some of the naivety from the congregation, if we're honest. And so just like the example that I gave, the whole time that he's berating his congregation, you hear, amen, say it, pastor, say it. And so we see the naivety, we see the prosperity gospel, and it's a turnoff. You know what I'm saying? It's a turnoff, if we're completely honest. The second thing is we have access to information at our fingertips that you normally would have had to go research. Like you had to go dig through some books, go to the library to find out that, there were 12, 13 other Jesus stories in different cultures, right? And so this begins to raise questions in people's minds like, hey, how much of this is real? How much of it is allegory? And how much do I necessarily need to apply to my life and make it such a stronghold that it shapes all of my political views? It shapes who I, am willing to relate with, build friendships with, etc. And so definitely thank you for that comment. Latrice Tucker, says a lot of people don't believe in voting, but they have to understand that politics won't look out for us if we're not represented in politics. Also think that's a great point. Like we said before, at the end of the day, God did raise up kings. And so we've got a pastor on the panel. I want to stop here for a second. Mike, do you got your audio straight?
Hey, can I ask you just one question?
For sure.
I just want to challenge Latrice on the question. It's what exactly do you mean when you say being represented? Because a lot of people have their own interpretation or things that matter to them and how they're trying to be represented in, politics and, different aspects of life. So that's all I had on that.
So yeah, Latrice, if you could drop us another comment to clarify that, we'll definitely make sure that we come back to it. So I'm going to jump out of the comment section because there's a lot, but definitely we'll get to you. Keep making those comments and definitely share this with your network. We want to add more people to the conversation because this is important. When it comes to the question that she left there, right? Politics won't look out for us if we don't. That's pretty much where it started in the Black church is the politicians weren't looking at our social issues in the Black community. That's where we congregated, and that's where we began to start having those really tough conversations. Corey, I would just ask you to expound on your thought on that.
Oh, certainly. And I'm getting a little reverb. So a little echo. Okay, there we go. So you know, in politics, man, we get caught into, you know, identity a lot. You know, that's how, you know, they able to, at times, that's how they're able to, well, not all the time, that's how they're able to basically um, curb and basically, I guess you could say, satisfy the population at times, where you can, you know, say, hey, we can get somebody who looks like this. They, a lot of times it's used through race or even religion and different things like that. You see it on both, all different, you know, all different aspects, whether it's race, religion, sexuality, different things like that. And people want to be represented in those aspects as far as identity, but we don't, we tend not to look at the politics, um the exactly what the person's running for, who they're affiliated with, where the following the money, different things like that. And so, I mean, hell, they've always used these tactics. They've always used these tactics on black people since way back then. It's how they've been able to implement a lot of different ideologies over the years, namely things like socialism, which, you know, if we're when we talk about circulating the black dollar and doing for ourselves and different things like that, it 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 goes against everything that, you know, we stand for on that. And so, you know, all you're doing is basically giving the power back to the people who put you in a bad position to begin with. But when we sit up there and we fall into these, you know, they create these heroes and villains, and then, you know, they always prop up and they got somebody black who, you know, represents us. We're able to just automatically jump to that person, and hey, they can speak, they may be able to speak well, and they, you know, they seem like they're on their side, but, you know, we're not really paying attention or really digging into the things that, you know, really understanding who the person is. We're playing identity politics within
Oh
this.
yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, just when you say, you know, black leader, I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, but I feel like I don't hear that when it comes to other cultures, right? So if you say, you know, the leadership in the black community, names like Al Sharpton come to mind, you know, Jesse Jackson, a few others. When it comes to other communities, you don't say like, you know, the Asian leadership or you know, the Hispanic leadership. And so I do believe that that's something that they use against us in a sense. They give us a figurehead. They connect them to a specific political party. And now this person is allowed to speak for all of us as if we're a monolith and we all think exactly the same, which definitely isn't true. Definitely isn't true. Lauren, what are your thoughts on that? I kind of want to stay there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think that I guess when you don't know who you are, how can you truly identify where you belong, right? And so we talk about representation, but I think a lot of times we don't exactly know how we want to be represented, and so it just causes internal conflict, I guess is the best way to say it, because we don't put ourselves in position to obtain the knowledge that we need to make an educated decision, and not to really go super Bible on this, but you know, the Bible does say, you know, the knowledge, the education is truly missing, that puts us in positions where we're either voting blindly or we're just providing our opinion blindly because we truly don't have the facts that are needed to make the right decision, which could be, if you actually did the work, it could go against what you think your current belief system is. And then that internal conflict gets in. And then what most of us do, instead of digging deeper, we just jump all the way out and say, this ain't for me, basically, is what this ain't for me. I did want to ask a question just because we have uh, a non-black person on the panel. Josh, is it true that in the Hispanic culture there are not Hispanic leaders, or is that right? Is that right, or is that wrong?
I feel like for the most part it's pretty right. I can't even think of anybody right now. Like, I think if anything, the closest person I can think of is Cesar Chavez, who fought for the rights of immigrant farm workers. Other than that, I can't think of anybody that's really represented us, at least in my lifetime.
Interesting.
Hey, look at Kareem
And I
Jackson.
read another Oh, go ahead, Lauren. What's that?
Look at Kareem Jackson's last comment. This is interesting. It says, "Truth is, they say black leadership because we are top in the world, second to only white Americans. We don't see our power." Like that's an extremely interesting statement, because I think we feel that it's so true that I think, in a lot of ways we feel powerless, right? And it's one of the things that AB is always talking about, which is we have more power than we think we do. We don't know how to work together to actually fuse that power to make it work in a larger capacity.
Well, and I think that a part of the reason that we can't really make it work in a larger capacity is because the quote unquote leadership, in my opinion, most of them have been sold out, right? Especially when it comes to the church. I don't really believe that it's the church's position to toe party lines, right? I believe that it's the church's position to educate their congregation on what would Jesus do in this situation, right? And so it isn't about Democrat, it isn't about Republican. It should refer back to the word of God and saying that, hey, according to the Bible, as a Christian, this should be your stance. But what I'm saying is, hey, as Black Christians, we are following the Democratic Party, or we are following the Republican Party, and it really takes away that choice. And then once we choose as a monolith, then we want to exclude anyone who thinks differently, and that's why we don't have any power, because we're way too separated. Andrew, I'd love for you to jump in at this point. What are your thoughts so far?
So what I'm hearing, and forgive me if I heard wrong, but we don't have any power, Black leadership, other cultures don't have leaders. The reason why other cultures don't have leaders, and there goes that echo again. The reason other cultures don't have leaders, the way that we are defining leaders, like the people who have name recognition in the Black community, is because other races, they have an agenda which leads them. And that agenda was established by the people. And the people are actually the leaders. And then they elect a mouthpiece or a voice that will say what their agenda is, which puts in perspective who the leader is. The leader is not that one person. The leader is not that person that stands tall and voices the agenda. These are the leaders right here. They've just elected one mouthpiece, because all of them speaking at the same time will give you that reverb or that noise. And we don't understand that. We are too afraid to understand that we are the power. So we're looking for a leader. And then we'll give them that title, hoping and praying that they will actually create our agenda. And because we are so separated, our agenda is not just one agenda. So we are, that's where I'd like to start.
It's tough, man, because that makes me think about Ice Cube when he had the Platinum Plan, right? And so Donald Trump was in office. The majority of the Black community felt that he was racist, and so at the end of the day, anything that he did was saw through the lens of a photo op, or just being opportunistic. And so when we talk about the Platinum Plan, Ice Cube actually created several points of interest for the Black community that we could politicize and kind of gain power and move the community forward. But he got a lot of backlash and ridicule because of the president that he went to talk to about these issues, right? And so how can we ever get anywhere if we hold the stance that if we're on this party line as a monolith, anybody on the other side, not only do we not listen to what they have to say, but we shouldn't even talk to or negotiate with them, even if it's in our own best interest. Andrew?
So I'd like to just address that. How can we, and we did not support Ice Cube. Ice Cube went to that president. Ice Cube, the way that you just described that, was an individual. And those persons, and I like to assume because I wasn't there, but those persons that stormed the Capitol on January 6th, those persons actually came there on the behest of many different leaders, meaning there was 10 people that was led by this guy. There were 200 people that were led by this lady. There were 500 people that were led by that particular person. And the mouthpiece contacted each and every one of those leaders that had this same agenda that they talked about over social media. Not one individual speaking for all these different agendas. So that's why some of those different agendas, such as Black women, such as whomever does not support Ice Cube, such as whatever or whomever, that's where the black starts to get shaded or colors start to show themselves.
Wow. Mike, can you hear us? Oh, we can't hear you. Unmute yourself.
I'm here.
There you are. Okay, so you've been, we got some echo. Let me mute some people. What are your thoughts so far?
Well, I think one of the things that, we're dealing with, both black and white, we don't understand our history. And this comes from 1619, taken from the Ninos and the Pintos, taken over to a European country that takes from our original mother country, in which we had the freedom to worship, to praise, and to now have a society of our own. And we're enslaved now, put into another culture that was unbeknownst to now how we see things, how we do things, now being made into something different, coming from a government, now to a point of a civil war, now to the point of being enslaved, then to a point now of Jim Crow. And all these things now perpetuated now the mindset of now white superiority. And so this whole racism situation now was covering them. We saw white Jesus, we saw a white leader, we saw white persons that were Batman, Superman, and all these superheroes, but we never saw a person that stood out amongst now those to lead us, to let us know how much empowerment we have. We have a situation all the way from the Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, where she led people. We had those that led people in small groups and through situations, and that allowed black folks to have their own. That's why the worship is so different, and that's why we have situations really that are divisive, which is called denominationalism. And denominationalism has really nothing to do with what the Bible says. But when we talk about, the brother was saying that, we have to have these people that are part of it and who we vote for, be Christians. Everybody's not a Christian. We have to now vote to what is best for our community. But if we don't study what's best for our community, then we cannot be educated. Just like I believe that the majority of people that voted for Barack Obama voted because he was black. Now I say this is because now these things weren't taught to us in the first generations and the second generations and the X generations in school, and it's not really taught at home. And so the interest now of the political now is pushed to the side. We got Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. We let politics over here. We got Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. We got a fundraiser over here. Are we doing something for the church? What are we doing now to educate us for those people that now are representing us in our district, our council, within our state, within our Senate, and now even to the point of the White House? And so now we look at these things now that become mind-boggling. So now, as Brother Andrew said, when we go to TV, we don't look at BET. We look at all these other different types of excerpts and things on the social media on our phone, but we don't pay attention to the things that's going to make the difference in our life. Now, as a Christian, let this mind be in you that is also in Christ Jesus. My point, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he's a new creation. Old things have passed away. One brother had on there said, let Caesar's be Caesar. Well, first of all, Caesar's not my God, and the government doesn't provide for me. But I got to have enough to know that my biggest voice that I have is my right to vote. And then another brother came, and we were talking about the freedom of the right of freedom, or the freedom of choice. The freedom of choice that I have is to serve God or not serve him. Now, me serving God should influence me morally. If you look at the points of 1 Corinthians tells us that do not be deceived. Bad company brings around corrupt people and makes other people that are good bad. And so now we have to, not the point of judging folk, we have to point now to where do we stand so far as our relationship with God often is a point now, a deterrent and a point of how we now treat our brother. How do I love you beyond the very point of where I am? And what I'm saying is this whole love is that we have to start first loving ourselves to know our purpose. There's three things. What is our call? What is our empowerment, our commitment, and what is our purpose? And these things like Dr. King, things like Malcolm X, these people brought a point about us that now we have an empowerment of our own. We can do for ourselves. We don't have to depend upon the white man. We can depend upon ourselves. But we've been shaded by all these other different types of buffoonery types of programs, seeing the big woman here and the people. If you look at Sanford and Son and all these other different types, what does it show? It shows us that you have folks that have not graduated from high school, that have not gone to college. We didn't see people coming into college until we saw the Cosby Show. Then we saw something from the Fresh Prince and things from that. But we never saw black people as how black people really are. We saw the stereotype, which now through that system of social media and through our government is called systemic racism. And the system now is what causes these things now to get into our mind, that now we depend upon subsidies other than our own ability. And so the Christian now has to look at the point, what does God mean to him? Is it just a coat that I wear? Is it something that I wear on Sunday? Is it something that I take to my job? Is it something that I take to college? Is it something that I take to school now to make and empower me better and put him in that? And so now the point of this, and I totally believe in what my frat brother Shaquille O'Neal said. If you want some of this cheese, you got to bring home some degrees. And so I mean, it's a point that it's the education piece. And so we don't have the time. We don't take the time. And then we have to understand certain things like CNBC, CNN, and all these different types. They have their own platforms. So you don't know who's lying. You don't know what to believe. And now you're shaded by all these different types of pundits. And so what we don't do is, if you notice too, we're not persons that focuses directly. Now for a large person or a large amount of people, when we have Dr. King, he now brings all these people. Even when we had the Million Man March, we had Louis Farrakhan, we had all these people that were out there. But when you look at the point, man, of the insurrection on January 6th, don't you know if there were black people on that step that we would be mowed down? And so it's the perception of now what we give. Our church gives the wrong perception of what the church should be because of what you said. This whole point, this brother that was over in Kansas and he's talking about their McDonald's babies and all this kind of stuff like that and tearing folks down instead of building folks up. And that's what we've allowed ourselves. We still have that slave mentality, and we should not have that. We're better than that. But we have to tell the truth. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. But if we don't know our history, we can't understand the platform of the present.
Good points, Mike. Hey, listen. Good points, man. Good points. And so, wow, I'm going to stop for a second. So for those of you that are tuning in, again, we appreciate you. Do us a favor and share this with your network. We want to add more people to the conversation. Also, give us a like, a heart, a thumbs up. Just let us know that you're still engaged in the conversation, because that really helps us out a lot. We got a ton of comments here, and we'll get back to those. But you brought up a good point, and I want to get all of your input on this. What to believe? Right. So you talked about MSNBC, you said CNN. We know there's Fox News Network. There's all of these media outlets that shape our opinions. Right. In this day and age of the internet, where we can go on, Wikipedia, we can go on Google, we can listen to these newscasts. How do you all individually decide if you've got to the truth or not? Right. And so do you have a trusted station that say, hey, if CNN said it, it's all good. If Fox said it, I believe it. Is there any particular news source, or what does your research process look like before you make a vote or any major decision in that area? And I'd like to start with you, Corey.
Well, one of my main things is I try to always get to the source as much as possible. A lot of times, anytime it's always going to be, we're going to be secondary. A lot of times when we're not there, we're not in the building or anything like that. Things can be, you know, if you go to a website or something, hell, it's a possibility that it could be, it could have been hacked or somebody could input their own information in it. As is, you know, things like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a good, you know, starting point for certain things. But no, what you try to do, what I always do is, you know, I find things, I find videos, I find actual proof of what a person's saying. We have government, when we talk about laws and everything, you sitting there watching on CNN, Fox, all of these things are always going to be spun, sensationalized. And so what you got to do is you got to get to the source. You got to read things for yourself. That's what we have, actual government websites to where they post the laws on their sites. So now, different things, or even when we're talking about, when we talk, when you had COVID and everything that was going on, you go to wherever they say are the reputable sites or reputable news sources. And so now you can use those things against them. You know, all of it, like I said, is going to be secondary, but these are the guys that they say, if it says in the WHO that, oh, this is the reputable source, and, you know, even though they could be lying themselves, but a lot of times you'll see that on, you know, on all of these different stations and news and journalists or whatnot, they contradict themselves, and a lot of times they're not telling the truth, especially according to, if you source, you know, go to the source. So always source your material. We have the internet now. That's one of the high points of what we got right now, is everything is recorded. So you got news clippings, everything, to where you can post it pretty much yourself. But we live in that time right now to where even with people seeing and even with proof, people still just kind of they still.
I mean, and is that because of their political leaning? Like, are we so of the do we have that gang mentality where it's like, hey, I'm a Crip, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
like, no matter what, I
yeah,
believe what the Crips believe. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
And so it's crazy. It's crazy. Josh, you're the youngest
Code the
person on
person.
the. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's just code of personality. We worship people. We worship people too much. We're not paying attention to the words that are coming out of their mouths. So,
For sure, for sure. Josh, as the youngest person on the panel, how do you do your research? How do you determine if what you're hearing is true?
I've got the nickname in my family is Google Boy, because anytime I didn't know anything, I would go to Google, because I don't like not knowing stuff. But for the most part, usually I'll go to CNN. Twitter usually kind of gets me started. Like, I'll be scrolling Twitter and I'll see things, which then I want to go and find the source, like Corey said. I've tried other resources, like Fox. I truly don't really like Fox. I was in a patient's room one time, and I believe the story was a Mexican immigrant had hit some old guy over the head with a brick and killed him. I want to say that's what it was. And just the way that they portrayed it and the way that they talked about it was completely different how I heard it on CNN later that day. Like, they said this evil, or they portrayed him in such a bad light, and CNN, it was just much more neutral, I guess. So I usually go to CNN, or I'll just scroll the internet until I find enough information to be able to make it believable.
That's good. That's good. A couple comments here. And so Kareem Jackson, he said he has an FM radio show in the Philippines. We were on COVID lockdown in December 2019 when Trump was still saying it was a hoax. We had to tell the Philippine people, don't listen to Trump and U.S. news. It was crazy. The point that I wanted to bring when it comes to me and my research, I really like to look at world news. And so I'll check out CNN because I know they're on the left end of the spectrum. I'll check out Fox News. I know they're on the far right. But I like to see what the rest of the world is saying, because sometimes you'll find people and, different shows, podcasts, et cetera, that are outside of the U.S. agenda. And I feel like a lot of times you can get a little bit of a different perspective. And then what I like to do is just kind of make a note of the common themes, right? And so there's always going to be those extremes. But then when I see something, just a common thread, no matter if it's Fox, CNN, or World News, Australia, et cetera, the BBC, I really try to stay with the common thread and build my thought process from there. Latrice Tucker, it looks like she responded. She said, I guess my question is, are some of us truly better due to how we live? If some of us didn't represent us in certain ways, would there actually be something to talk about, an actual stereotype to debate? And so if you could clarify, but I believe what she's saying is the way that we carry ourselves on social media sends out and projects and creates the stereotypes that we now have to live under. Right. And now all of these things begin to shape, our political views, our stances, etc. We've got Pastor Brooks. Thanks for tuning in, Pastor Brooks. I know you're a busy man. Definitely appreciate the support. He said, no media should be trusted wholeheartedly. I agree with that 100%. All have an agenda, and educating is not on the agenda. I want to pause right there. Andrew Boykin, what are your thoughts on that comment?
I was just getting ready to thank Pastor Brooks for stating that. Media outlets have media moguls who set the agenda for all their affiliates worldwide. And that agenda is based on a structural power that they have. We keep using the word we, and we keep using the word who do we look for as a trusted source. I look to me as a trusted source. If my lights are out, my lights are out. If my land is being taken, my land is being taken. If my community is suffering from poisoned water, my community is being suffering from poisoned water. I don't have to look at any television source across the world to know what my agenda should be. And I don't have to look at anyone outside of my community or outside of my world to know what those next to me also know. And when we collect our voices together, and one is just so happened to be a little bit more bold, and their shoulders are up, and their voice is a little bit more articulate so they can speak different languages, including American, or including English, or including French, or including whomever's listening, then they will become our mouthpiece to speak what we already know, not for somebody to tell us what we should think.
So let me make sure I got this right. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're just saying that Black people have a God complex that trickles over into people. And so just because a person's articulate, they dress well, they stand with their shoulders back, chin up, etc., we allow them to speak for us, and we assume that they know exactly what they're talking about or what's best for our community without further research or pushback. Is that what you're saying?
No. What I said is when we, meaning the six of us, say, for instance, we lived in the same complex and our lights were out and our water was bad, I would probably suggest that Andrew A.L. Johnson actually speak because A.L. Johnson actually goes out into the world every single day. I don't. Mike Patton is in the gym and the church every single day. Josh is still young. Corey, he talks with his head like that. And Lojo is he's Lojo. So I would ask you to speak, but I wouldn't make that a demand. I would go to the others and give them my reason why I think that you should speak. And they would give me their reasons why they think Mike should speak. And we would collectively vote on who should speak about our lights being out in our building and our water being bad. We don't have to look at social media or someone outside of us to give us an agenda. Our agenda is what's wrong with us. That's our agenda. And our agenda is what we want to make right.
Thanks for clearing that up. Mike, it looks like you have a comment. Unmute yourself.
I totally agree with what he's saying. But in such case, see, and me coming, and Andrew, you the same way, we coming from the days of the civil rights movement. And the church is the place, the greatest meeting place. It's also the biggest and largest day of segregation on Sunday there is in the United States. But blacks came together to listen to a voice now they were energized and moved by, that now had the vision of God, that they did not have of themselves. And so these leaders now, they step in front to give us now a point of saying, I had a dream. And this whole point now of I have a dream now is a point now we can look beyond the veil. We can look beyond where we are in the present, because we went through these systems, and the system brought about now the welfare system. So we become codependent upon this and codependent upon that. And the moral scope of that now is changed. And we had people during those times, and even up today, Al Sharpton. We look at the moral scope. Just here in Lee Summit alone, we have 12 African Americans that went swimming in an all-white pool and were denied going there. How does that now feel to them? What do they see from that? Where are our churches and where are our people and our leaders now to help represent them? Well, we had them with Trayvon Martin. We had them for all these other different types of people that now we saw that got killed by police brutality, and we have people to represent them. Why? Because we have to have a voice somewhere. Mainly and most times, our voice comes from the church. And so from this whole piece, and I totally agree what they're saying about the news, but the question is, how do I get information if I don't read and if I don't listen? And so what I like to do is listen to somebody who looks like me, somebody who talks like me in a sense, whereas I see now the points of them now having the same energy of where I came from, where they came from. I want to talk to somebody, not always a white panel, but some brothers in there now to represent now my culture. But now what represents me, some may say, well, God ought to represent you and that's it. That's true. But we live in a world of us that now we have to respond into this issue. And the thing about it, Pastor Book says this, and this situation wasn't even in the news. We had to read it through the paper. I got a sideline because I know a lot of police here in Lee Summit. We had a sideline view, right? And this didn't even make, how could something like this didn't make the news? Well, we know how Lee Summit is. Lee Summit, just within the last 25 years, started letting black folks even in it. There's a thing called redlining that a lot of people don't know in Kansas City around Nichols and all those of the plaza. There are certain areas where blacks had to live and blacks could not live. And so we put us out in Prospect someplace. And so what I'm saying is that we have to pay attention to the things we see around us, but we're too much, which is true, paying attention to how we're trying to handle our household. What brings me money? What brings me from day to day? What keeps my medical situation together? What makes my finances and everything together? And so all these other things we kind of veer away from, and we let the leaders do the job instead of us doing the job. And I love it when we have, go ahead. And I love it when we have people that come out together. Just like when we used to march, and I was marching out there during the Michael Brown situation from St. Louis, and we thought they were coming here to Kansas City, and there was going to be this big raid and things like that. And so we tried to protect ourselves down the plaza. I was down there every night with all the other brothers. And it was really something to see how folks came together. And it wasn't just black folks. It was white folks that now felt the compassion. They were deeply moved and deeply affected by our predicaments, because our predicaments were part of their predicaments as well. And so they felt that compassion. When they went to the March on Washington, it just wasn't not black folks out there. There was white folks, there was Jews, there was all kind of different type, Mexicans, all different type of people, because now everybody felt a part of this family. And so what is the church? The church is not your denomination. The church is the family that belongs to Christ. And denomination is what separates and puts one over here. You like this God. You worship the God this way. You got to speak in tongues. But nobody talks about love, and nobody talks about sin. Nobody talks about the moral scope of it. We talk about the agenda of it.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of the problem comes in, because let me get this. Okay, there we go. So when you say a voice comes from the church, but even in the church, we aren't on the same page, right? So, Andrew, you have something you want to add?
I don't think that, and just forgive me, I don't think a lot of people truly understand what took place on January 6th when they raided when they stormed the Capitol. They weren't looking for someone to represent them. They were representing themselves. Let me say that one more time. They were representing themselves. Their voice, who just so happened to be Trump, was speaking for them. And when the rest of the world did not listen to their voice, they represented themselves by showing up. They said, hey, apparently you didn't hear our voice. We don't have a representative. We don't have a voice. We don't have an agenda. That's why we look for someone to save us. And most importantly, the reason why the we in us never works is because we're not a we. If you look at January 6th, you will find that there were many different types of people in that crowd. They had different religions. They had different non-beliefs. They had different jobs. They had different skin colors. But their agenda was the same.
So let me ask you this then. How is it that, so Mike said something, he said our voice comes from the church, right? And I read the statistics that said 50% of the respondents who were Black said that they were likely to hear a political message in their place of worship, compared to 25% of whites hearing political messages in their place of worship. And so how are they able to have that cohesiveness and thought, like you alluded to, Andrew, that cohesiveness, but we're talking about it literally double the amount of the time in our places of worship. So what's the disconnect there?
So the disconnect, you mentioned at the beginning of this show that the church was the power of it started back in civil rights. Power didn't start in civil rights. Power started when back in 1700, if not sooner, if not before that, when they needed a place to breathe. That cross symbol that was given to them, that cross symbol is recognized in many different parts of the world as a place of calm, neutral ground, a place of peace, meaning this is not a war ground. So for Blacks to be allowed finally to get on neutral ground, that meant that the slave owners weren't going to hang them or burn them on that particular day or while they were there, because they recognized the world vow that they took. Okay, we're going to be a part of this agenda, which is bigger than us. So as we began to grow within that and pray that someone would save us, 50% of us believe that someone else is going to save us. White America knows that 25% may believe that, but 75% knows that we are going to save ourselves because God empowered us to. He gave us that power. Matthew 17:17 said he gave us everything that we need in order to thrive. We just don't believe it.
Love it. Mike, you had a comment? Unmute yourself.
I just want to respond to what he's saying. You see, we have to understand this, that after the Emancipation Proclamation that was really signed in 1862, but we didn't know about it until 1865, then there was a point of Reconstruction between 1867 and 1877. We had these abolitionists, General Lee and all these other people, and Blacks had to now try to find their way now to keep ourselves in the South free. From that time, we move up. Blacks found a way to gather together, now to come to some type of ground. We are the most strongest, most forgiving persons in this world, in the stuff that we have been through. We are forgiving, we are loving, we are forgiving people, because if it were to be on the other end, the persons that should have been on the Capitol doing what they did could have been us. But we don't roll that way. You had 7 races, the MAGA, the QAnon, and all those that were there, and those that were in Charleston saying the Jews would not replace us, that we got us religious race theory that we have. And so this race theory says now that certain people cannot be where they are. And it's a point of the message now that we had to now stand our ground, and we stand now, and we looked and saw how white people react when they feel like something now has overturned them or they didn't get their right. I mean, and so when we look at Donald Trump, we look at, I don't care what anybody said, that incitement now, it perpetuated the insurrection on that day. He motivated those people. And you're right, Andrew. You're exactly right. Those people went out now to do what they were going to do just in a large mass of people. Now, following what I call that cult, those people are paying now for what their deeds are. I mean, who follows a man that does that? Who follows a man that we saw that openly says certain things that he says about touching a woman in their private parts, because and then people still vote for him? Well, one thing, he wasn't part of the establishment. And the Conservative Party does not want people to be a part of the establishment. Black people have always been a part of the establishment. So now we have to ask ourselves, is the Democratic Party really the right party for black folks, which we have the majority of the black folks that support?
So, okay, so if you say that, let's get this echo over here. Okay, so if you say that the majority of black people are Democrats, I have absolutely no statistic on that. And then we tie this into religion, right? This is where I've always been confused, because if you follow the Bible, technically a lot of the Democratic talking points are in direct contradiction or opposition to the Bible. Whether we choose homosexuality, the use of drugs, drug legalization, marijuana legalization, etc. So how do you reconcile that? And with you being a pastor, I'm sure this is something that you probably dealt with and you've had to hash out in your own mind. How do you support a party when their beliefs are in contradiction to the Bible? Unmute yourself.
Situation, I have to say what the Bible says. For in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of men and lovers of themselves, denying the very, having a form of godliness, denying the very power from within. If I don't stand for what the Bible says, then I'm not preaching the true gospel. So now there's a repercussion that happens after that. Now you look at people that have the big churches, and a lot of times, and I'm not throwing stones at anybody, I'm just saying we allow people to have positions in the church that now, because of their talent, overrides now the sin that's unrepented in their lives. And so what we don't want to do is be offensive to what the Bible says, because it takes away the money and now the congregant income that now goes to the pastor, goes to the outline of that administration. So there's a fear of that.
Let me clear it up. So what you're saying is we have pastors that essentially sugarcoat the message of the Bible to not lose their parishioners. Do I got that right?
They lose their parishioners, they start losing money, and they start losing their power and their prowess in their particular area.
Okay, but let me ask you this then. So let's just say the last election, on one end, we believe that racism is wrong, and most people assume Trump to be a racist. So if Trump's racist, that's against the Bible. Over here, we have the legalization of marijuana, et cetera. How do you choose? Is it the greater or the lesser evil? How do you choose?
Situations are the situation. You have to follow the money. And when you follow the money, understand Donald Trump now is bringing these people. And understand now, there's 47 million black folk. We got 17 million, what I understood, now that voted for the Republican Party. Okay? That's not half. That's somewhere in the middle. And so more black people voted for the Democratic Party than they did the Republican. But right now, the money, and so now when you cut subsidies, now when you're a conservative, now when you don't do handouts, now to them it's kind of like the Reagan, the trickle down economic situation. So now more money that now goes into their pocket, and taxes are cut from the hierarchy of the business, now opens up now a place where now the rich get richer and they're not caring about the poor. And so now in this situation, I feel that, if I'm talking about the narrative, what you're saying is that these situations, when we deal with politics and we deal with religion, You know, we have to now, and I always advocate people who are believers to run, but it's a dirty business. And it's hard to put and connect the two together. Somebody's going to finagle, somebody's going to lie, somebody's not going to tell the truth, somebody's not going to be upfront in order to get a vote to get their agenda through. That's why we have lobbyists.
So, Anthony, you had a comment?
So, Mike made a comment about if we would have stormed the Capitol, but we are the most peaceful people and love and so forth and so on. I was told, and I believe this, and it's not in contradiction to what Mike believes, but I just want to share my belief that was given to me by my cousin. My cousin had told me that the slave trade that started in the Caribbean before they even got to the Americas, there was eye gouging and burnings and a whole lot of horrendous things, far worse than just hanging. And what they finally did when we got to America. What they were doing was they were conditioning the black man. They were conditioning the ones that were going to live and eventually come to the Americas. They were conditioning them so well that that white slave owner and his wife and his 4 children could play and eat and drink lemonade in the yard where 100 slaves were working in the field, knowing that not one of them would lift that hoe to them because they were already broken and conditioned. We didn't storm the Capitol because we are in fear of our lives. White people that storm the Capitol, they don't fear their life. They support their agenda with their life. We don't have anything to support for our life.
We got a couple comments here from Pastor Brooks that I think are very relevant. He says politics and religion are 2 totally different things. And to that, I would say, I mean, they technically are 2 different things. However, if your religion shapes your decisions that you make in politics, how different are they really? Or maybe they're different, but they're definitely intertwined. I mean, then he says, I don't have to agree with you on every issue to support you politically. You representing me politically does not mean you represent me spiritually. Definitely makes sense. Man, we actually are over our time. This has been happening almost every week. The conversations get so good, so it's like really hard to bring this to a close. But Lauren, you're definitely a good listener. It's one thing that I love about you most, man. And so, from the last few things that you've heard, we haven't heard from you in a while. What are your thoughts?
What are my thoughts? What are you willing to die for? What are you willing to lay your life on the line for? I'm glad that they came out, right? Because we keep making this assumption. It's an assumption because we don't know. We're just assuming based off of maybe what some historical data tells us that had we been the ones to storm the Capitol, we'd all be dead. That's an assumption. Whether it's a true assumption or not, it's an assumption, right? We live in too much fear to take that risk. And, as my man Bruce Arians said, no risk it, no biscuit. There's so much to uncover, right? And I don't want to take up a bunch of time. There's so much to uncover within a lot of those conversations. I think about education and the fact that at some point it became undigestible to the next generation and they stopped listening. And we, as older constituents, say, well, these young folks don't listen. And we are constantly blaming them instead of trying to find ways to engage with them and help them understand the things that we want to say. Whenever they have a question, we take it as back talk instead of trying to explain what we're trying to say. We don't educate. We are very, very much trying to just tell people what to do. When we talk about leadership, there has to be leadership. Like, there has to be leadership. It's not a question of if, it's a question of who, right? And the reason that the church is struggling in some capacities is simply because of the position that we put our leadership in, right? We don't look at them as just men or women that are leading us. We look at them as gods, and so when they go and make a mistake, then all of a sudden we want to attack their character as if every single human being in this world is that they're perfect, that they're above reproach. And so then when they make a mistake, then all of a sudden we're upset, and now all of a sudden, and excuse my French, but they ain't shit no more. And so we go out and we try to find the next leader, and then that person lets us down and they ain't shit, and we just keep this cycle going of not being able to find a leader because we simply don't respect humanity, right? And so we say a lot of things in jest because it sounds good. We take photo ops because it looks good, but are we really willing to talk about the truth? Are we really willing to battle back and forth when we don't agree, to see if we are open enough to listen, to say, hey, maybe he was kind of right, and that's a big problem, right? I've been sitting here chomping at the bit, not to be heard, but to show that not everybody sees things from the same perspective, which is why we absolutely have to have dialogue, because no two people think alike. So if no two people think alike, then we're always going to have some type of discourse that we have to talk about. And so we have to be open to listening to each other, actually actively listening, not just listening with a response already in mind, but with our brains turned off and our ears open so we can actually receive the message. We talk about how do we get our information? We get our information from everywhere, from everybody. Like, that's the truth, because we hear so much, because we live in the information era. The information is everywhere. And so, therefore, we get our information from everybody. Corey and I talk all the time about different things. Sometimes we disagree, sometimes we agree, but we have conversation. AB, always, hey, think about it from this perspective, though. What do you think about this? AL, you and I, we have conversations. I had a conversation with LaRon this week because I felt like I put him in a bad spot last week, and he actually said, no, I appreciate you doing that. And it brought us to a different place of understanding. I talked to my man Josh, because that's going to be my son-in-law. So we talk. Why? Because I need to understand him, because he now has a piece of me, right? I talked to Brother Patton. We had a 3-hour lunch where we talked, and I listened, and I received the information without saying a word, because I just wanted to hear what he was saying, right? So there's so many pieces of this that we have to divulge and talk about. And we talk about black and white and what that means. We talk about Republican and Democrat and what that means. We talk about husband and wife, son and daughter. We talk about so many different things that we have to uncover in order to get to a truth that, we can agree on in our own circles. Because again, no two people think alike. That's why you have different cultures. They believe different pieces, different things in their own worlds, in their own minds, in their own spirits.
Right. Excellent. Wow. I can't even add anything to that. Corey, we haven't heard from you for a while. What are your thoughts?
Piggybacking off of that, yeah, we all have our own cultures and everything, and this is I'm gonna just ask a simple question, because different things like morality, things that we view as positive and negative, those are all things that can that are subjective, and everybody can have their own interpretation to what those things mean to them. So when you're dealing in things like politics and let's speak about on a local level, state level, those are things that are important. All the stuff that happens on Washington and television, over there in Washington, DC, that stuff doesn't matter. Understand that those people have no power outside of basically taking from you, taking your money. So we focus on those things. So when you're elected, and understand when you're elected, you're a servant to the people. And what happens when you get into that position? You have to be able to move universally. So let me ask everybody on this panel right now: does a person, and I'll go to one of the most extreme things, does a person have the right to be racist? To have a racist mindset?
Yeah, I mean
Well,
they absolutely do.
that can,
Yeah.
and even that can be blurred. Let me just say, yeah, let me just say, does a person have the right to? They don't have to like a particular race. A black person don't have to like a white person, or a Mexican, or a white person doesn't have to like a black person. Do they reserve that right to have that, to have that mindset?
I mean, I think they have the right definitely to have that mindset, but what they should consider is we all live in a world where we share resources,
Right.
you know, at the end of the day. And so, where does that put us? You know, constantly in a state of combativeness, constantly in a state of war. And so, is that the type of world you want to live in? I believe is the ultimate question.
And
Does
and
anybody?
that and that's where the cutoff point is, because we can live we can live in a world like that, where everybody can have their own, how they may feel about a certain person. I don't have to like you because the way your eyes look, or different things like that. But where it gets cut off, and where, rights and different things like that get cut off, is when it affects the next person. And those are things that we need to understand. When it affects the next person, that's when you've jumped the line. When implementing violence upon a person, or when you're standing in the way and trying to block a person. Not business or anything like that. You can do business any way that you want to, but it's when you decide that you want to do business your way, while also trying to hinder the next man's business because of how they may look, or what their religion may be, and things like
Well,
that.
I mean, what you said actually kind of rolls into the conversation about Donald Trump. So I saw a post, hundreds of comments, man, very interesting dialogue in there. But it talked about what you said. So could Trump be racist? Okay, yes, possibly. But then on the flip side of it, you almost have to look at his actionable steps in his track record. So we have January 6th as one example of maybe racism. On the flip side, we have rappers that he let out of jail. Was Lil Wayne, I believe, ASAP Rocky. He kind of intervened there. He was working on reform. He helped black colleges with funding, et cetera. And so, my question to your question would be: can a person hold racial bias, not specifically racism, but racial bias, but still act in the greater good or for the support of someone that they, oppose? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a person that's able to make that discernment, and make that discernment within his actions, and it's going to show within his actions. Every action that he takes within that. So yeah, no, because it could be a person that can sit out there and state all day that they love you, but what are their actions that they're taking upon you? Are they, is it detrimental, or is it helping what you got going on? So.
Yeah, no. Anybody else want to jump on that? Mike, you have something to say? Mute yourself.
Brother Corey, whenever you looked at, and I don't know if you guys observed this, there was always 4 or 5 black people behind Donald Trump when he would now do his campaign. And there was always a few. That's called political pondering. And so now it made it seem as though that blacks were now engaged and enjoying in this. And when now you put blacks in certain areas, blacks say, well, black people must be for him. So he tries to gather these people into places where he is. It seems like he's all for now everyone, when we know his agenda is not everyone, because his constituents are white. And so where do we take this? And we take
real quick. Do we know that, or do we assume that?
But let me tell you what Dr. Hosford and I are doing with this. I have a program that we put together along with him. It's called the AIR program. Let me just say this right quick. It's called A.I.R. Accountability, Integrity, and Responsibility. Okay? We're sharing with our black people in our city, gathering them together to define what is accountability, what is integrity, and what is responsibility. Along with that, number 3, what is your call? What is your commitment? And now what is your purpose? So we're giving them, like he said, dialogue to talk about so that we can join and engage things that are productive within the individual. Because I can't be productive to you if I cannot be productive to myself. Am I showing up to my job? Who is my first priority? Well, if I'm a Christian, of course, it's God. My accountability is to my family. But if I don't know what a family is, what it does, what it says, and what it reveals, then I'm kind of left out because I may not have had my father. I may not have had my parents there and not know the didactical pieces and outlines of what a good family should look like. So we're there to help them. The Bible says also, for the strong ought to bear the infirmities of the weak. So that's what we're doing.
Okay. Now, what I'm saying is it's a little bit, it's, in my opinion, it's dangerous for us to kind of make blanket statements that a person just did that, this or that for a photo op. Because at the same time, I remember, I believe it was a couple of years ago, we had Hillary Clinton and other members of the Democratic Party with kente cloths on, kneeling down and doing all of these different things. And ultimately, like you said, we have to look at the actions versus what they sell us, right? And so even if we took Biden, for example, and I don't know if this is right or wrong, I'm just putting something out there, but the same aid that Trump gave to the black colleges, Biden took it away. The same people that wanted to have a Biden's ear, he rejected them where Trump accepted them. And so, for someone who has a balanced mindset and doesn't toe a party line specifically, it's really hard to reconcile that. I know, Corey, you have a lot of political things that you have on your podcast. And so I see you nodding a little bit, so you know what I'm talking about. Well, what is your thought on that? Just automatically making these assumptions about candidates versus looking at what they actually do.
No, that's exactly what it is, man. It's all about the action, because you have a lot of people that they're feeding you lip service, and like I said, I'm Donald Trump. If you look at a lot of the reasons that people don't like Donald Trump, I don't like him for different reasons. I don't like him for different reasons. A lot of people follow, the different narratives and things that they see on television. They're not really paying attention to exactly what's going on and who he's exactly affiliated with. When you look at the different affiliations and when you actually following the money, you'll see that these people, whether it's from Democrat or whether it's from Republican, they're accepting money from the same people. They're being funded by the same people. A lot of stuff is public online. When you look at top shareholders, look at who the shareholders. I challenge everybody who's watching this right now. Go on Google right now. You can go on Yahoo and look at the top shareholders, the top 10 shareholders for CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News. And you show me, matter of fact, what you have to do is you have to see who actually owns these companies. So CNN may be owned by, I think, Time Warner. Fox is owned by the Fox Corporation and different things like that. So you go up and see who actually owns this. Then see who's the top shareholders. Everybody go in there and tell me what you see. So we get sucked into all of these, these political games. And, if you watch wrestling, WWE, you watch UFC, all of that stuff, they perform in the ring for the entertainment. But what are the things that gets people in the seats or brings them to fight night? They have to sell it. They have to sell the fight. And so it's all about the action. It's all about the action when we're dealing with these people, and we have to know exactly, are they contradicting themselves? Are they staying true to what they said they'll be doing? What is this action doing? You said you would do this, but you're doing, the complete opposite.
And that makes me think of something that Andrew has said many times in our conversations about politics. When you're looking at Democrat, Republican, it's two wings on the same bird. Essentially. So what you're saying, we have these power structures, we have these conglomerates. If you look at the top, it's all of the same few people. And so it's all manipulation. We're just puppets on a string for the most part. There was something that came out from one of the other comments when we talked about our need for leadership, why we need leaders. One thing that comes to mind, so like when we went back to slavery, we touched on that a little bit. Black people weren't allowed to read. And so I read something at one point that said that they would choose one of the slaves and they would basically give them their sermons. And so even as slaves, we still had church, we still congregated, but the message was filtered through the slave master. And so we have been accustomed to, we've been conditioned since slavery to listen to this one figurehead and accept everything that they say is gospel. And so I think that's been to our own detriment for sure.
Watch the Nat Turner movie.
What was that?
Watch the Nat Turner movie. You'll see in the middle of one of his sermons, he realizes how he's been fed his information, and he literally stops and starts to change his message in that moment because he realized how he had been fed his information and that he was basically a puppet for his slave master.
Wow. So the rabbit hole goes deep. It goes deep. Josh, again, man, we always come back to you, you know, as our youth on the panel. I know that this has been a lot, you know, that we've talked about, but like what's kind of like your general thoughts?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot to digest. I think that when it all comes down to it, it comes down to perception. You know, because we could all be Christian, but we're still all going to perceive the Bible in a slightly different way. We can all hear the same same sermon, and we're all going to take something home that's different from what somebody else took home. And so I think when it comes to how religion and politics go together, I think you need to stay true to yourself. You can let religion guide you in that, but I don't think you should let anyone make that decision for you. So if your pastor's telling you that this is how the Bible tells you to make these political decisions, you take how the Bible tells you how to make the political decisions from your own decision. Like when Trump was elected in 2016, I remember the pastor said, there's a lot of stuff going on right now that kind of interferes with the church. You know, Hillary Clinton was pro-abortion. Donald Trump was pro-choice or pro-life. And he said, just when you're trying to make your decision, don't think about what I'm telling you, but think about what you truly feel and make your political decision off of that.
Love it. But Matt, we definitely come to our time. I'm going to ask you, Andrew. Can you just tie this all together for us? Just kind of what you've heard, and just kind of like a final conclusion, because unfortunately we got to stop this conversation at some point. And so, Andrew, can you tie all these things together for us?
No is the easy answer. I cannot. And the reason why is Pastor Brooks talked about, you know, I don't have to agree with you on every issue to support you politically. And you representing me politically does not mean you represent me spiritually. We don't have to have someone tie up everything. An agenda does not have to be singular. There could be many agendas that goes towards that piece of pie to feed us all. We don't know that. And as far as that racism stuff, is Trump racist? Is Trump racist? Is this person racist? That their agenda racist? Whatsoever? I would like to suggest, and this is just my suggestion, it does not reflect the views of Elevating Men. I would like to suggest that many, if not most, Black people are the most racist people in the world, especially towards other Black people, which is why
Bro, you about to start a whole nother show. You about to start a whole nother show, man.
Which is why we will not trust each other. We will trust Trump and everybody else who kills us before we trust another Black person. And that's embedded in our teachings, our racism.
Ouch. That might have to be a whole segment. Listen, everybody who's tuned in, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Appreciate the likes, the comments, the shares, your engagement. It means a lot to us. And it helps us further the conversation, because at the end of the day, we're 6 guys talking amongst ourselves, and some people are listening. But the more that you share and have these conversations with your own network, we can really begin to affect change, because change does start with changing the mind. Changing the mind starts with dialogue and conversation. And so we appreciate each and every one of you. I know you guys have had your final thoughts. Mike, did you have any last words that you wanted to leave us with?
Matter of what Brother Boykin said kind of put the end to it. We walk by faith and not by sight, and there's nothing else to say. I like the comment. I love you, brothers, just to let you know that, and I'm so happy to be a part of this orbit of people that are just great thinkers and great men and representative of this community, of your household and of yourselves. And I appreciate you from the bottom of my heart. I just wanted to say that.
Appreciate you too, boy. Appreciate you too. And so for those of you that are tuning in, this isn't it. This is just it for tonight. And so tune in next Monday, same time, same place. We're going to continue the conversation. We're going to continue breaking these barriers. And it's going to be awesome. You don't want to miss it. In the meantime, we want you to go to YouTube, type in Elevating Men, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There you'll see the archives of all of our past conversations. We're at about roughly 50 conversations that are just as enlightening, just as deep, just as thought-provoking. And so come along this journey with us. Also follow us on Elevating Men at Facebook so you can catch our daily posts. A lot of them are centered around motivation, mindset, mental health, etc. And so we appreciate each and every one of you. Man, also, I got to plug myself really quick. If you are in need of life insurance, that's what I do outside of our nonprofit Elevating Men. Visit aljohnsongroup.com. There's a lot of articles there that can help you understand how you can protect your family. I also want to promote Andrew Boykin's Restoration, which is a plan for, I'm going to let you explain it real quick. Give us one sentence on the restoration. One sentence.
Restoration is an agenda for us to stop talking about this conversation that began when we landed in America a couple of decades ago, and it's about actually putting, as Lauren says, Lojo says, giving us a new narrative.
Love it.
Do something about it.
Perfect. Lojo, the Car Pro. Can you just tell us a little bit about your business, how people can support you?
Yeah, Lojo the Car Pro. If you are in need of wheels, give me a call. If you don't know what you're looking for, let me educate you, put you in the right mindset and the right mentality to make an educated decision that will get you in a reliable vehicle.
Love it. Corey, tell them about your podcast.
Well, it's more, just more on the commentary side, of course, just trying to make a change to the mindset of, different things that we got going on in this country. It's like Dick Gregory once spoke about America. America took America changed clothes, but it never took a shower. And that's on a bigger scale. And we're dealing with that in our communities also. So we got a lot of things, man, the different things I talk about as far as, just conflict resolution, the information that we receive and how to process it the right way, going against what we're being fed on a daily basis. That's just basically, that's my personal agenda right there. So, check me out. It can be controversial at times, but if you give me a chance, I'm open to, I'm open and I'm receptive because we're all in this together. We're all trying to build. I'm trying to teach while also learning at the same time. So I definitely appreciate y'all having me on here. I learn a lot all the time, man.
Love it. We loved having you too. Mike, just tell them real quick about your personal training business so they can support you.
Best in the okay.
There you go.
Mike's Main Event Personal Training Center, known as the best in the Midwest. My objective is to help you add to your life so far as your health is concerned, as it relates to now how you eat, your living patterns, exercising, building muscle, dense muscle, getting yourself in shape, becoming healthy, living a more productive lifestyle, understanding that African American men make up probably about 82% of now health-related risk as it relates to chronic heart failure, heart attacks. We deal with diabetes, we deal with hypertension, high blood pressure, and women are even on a higher level. So if you're looking for a place to really get good training and to get moved and motivated in the right way, and get the body right and get the body to the point right now, you're lowering your body fat and now you're increasing down the productivity in your life. come to Mike's Main Event. That's 816-916-3503.
And last but not least, definitely want to shout out Josh. When we started this series, we were looking for a younger man to join the panel. We talked to several. The search was difficult, but we found someone who's articulate, well-spoken, has great thoughts. And so, Josh, we appreciate you coming on, sharing your knowledge and your wisdom with us. We really appreciate you. Is there anywhere that people can connect with you, or how can people find you online?
I'm on Facebook at Josh Castaneda, but also I really appreciate you guys for having me on. I've also learned a lot, and it's been really eye-opening for me. This was something that I was originally nervous about, but it's a great opportunity that I'm happy to be a part of.
Thank you. Well, everyone, like I said, thanks for tuning in. We're going to be here next week, and also look for our next series. So there's one more part to this one. Next month, we're going to be talking about raising children as men. Man, it's going to be good. It's going to be good. So follow us along the journey. Find us at elevatingmen.com. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.